Okay. We're going. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about, let's see, this is our 7th part of Yechezeqel, and we'll be talking about verse 10 when we get there. This is a really interesting verse. Keep in mind, Yechezeqel is in captivity, and Yechezeqel as a name means Elohim brings strength. This 10th verse is about empowerment, and it's something that we need to register, that we're the ones that allow ourselves to remain caught up in whatever it is that puts chains on us. But Elohim empowers us to overcome it if we will choose to allow it to be. So let's kind of breeze into this. So one who is in captivity like Yechezeqel was at the time of this writing needs to be empowered to escape the chains of bondage. This 10th verse of Yechezeqel teaches us about the empowerment that we have in Yahuwah Elohim and the choices that we have to move toward it or away from it. So let's kind of review what we talked about over the last several verses, and then we'll take a look at this verse. I know we do this every now and then, but we've got enough under us, so let's take a look at the ideas that we've developed so far. Start with our existence, past, present, and future, is found in and depends on Yahuwah, who is our Elohim. In our life, we will experience change, some positive and some negative. We will grow in Yahuwah, or we will shrink or halt growth. We might even fall away. The choice is and always will be ours to make, that we can yoke ourselves to Elohim through His Word and receive His protection, nourishment, and rest within the walls of His tent, or that we can remain outside the tent wall, yielding to transgression until it becomes sin, which is ourselves separated from Yahuwah Elohim, and thus in a situation in which the light, is absent. We must be aware that we can be in the middle of Yahuwah Elohim while being separated from Him, or that we can yoke ourselves to Elohim through His Word and receive His protection, nourishment, and rest within the walls of His tent, if we will consider that if He will not leave us, then, and if He is always present, then we have to realize that it is us who leaves Him, or we fail to perceive His presence. The throne of Yahuwah Elohim, His power and authority, is always present. It's up to us to be able to perceive it. We need to humble ourselves before Yahuwah Elohim and be willing to shed any exterior pride that we might be wearing in order to receive instruction and guidance that we need to bring us out of captivity and renew, repair, and restore us. We must heed closely something more important than ourselves, something greater than ourselves. We must first be able to see the throne before we can ascend to it. We can't squeeze water through the wall if we are in exile or outside of it. In other words, we cannot try to grasp Elohim's understanding or His undeserved favor by our own strength. Yahshua said that the door and the way to life was narrow, and few are they that find it. In this we can consider that to be made new and to be restored is to find one's way by squeezing through the door of the wall that leads to life. We must humble ourselves before Elohim and be willing to shed the carnal side, the exterior pride. Let's see, where were we? This is the only way to bring positive change in our lifetime. To truly come into existence is to find in everything at every time the declarations, commands, and promises found in the Word of Yahuwah Elohim. It is according to and on account of the instruction and guidance of Yahuwah Elohim that He strengthens us, teaches us, and ministers to us. Then through Yahshua we are restored and rebuilt, lifted up from contempt and insignificance. Then we went into the third and fourth parts of this, that the bronze coming up from the mist, when we read that it was a representation of the redemption, deliverance, and restoration that was called the electrum, or the ha-hashmal, that we developed an idea that if we say hey means to behold, but the hey, the letter hey, also represents the distinct spirit of Yahweh, then we have to consider that what is being beheld is Yahweh's spirit of redemption, deliverance, and restoration that is a model of Yahshua, both as a concept and as the Son of Man. And we talked about this, that we have Yahshua as a concept, that we can have redemption, deliverance, restoration that comes from Yahuwah. That's the concept, that it is there. All we have to do is believe and receive. But that it was Yahshua as the Son of Man that made this concept available because of the blood that he shed. That in being the vehicle of sacrifice, he was able to remove the curse of sin and death, and that he was able to restore the covenant, not the covenant at Sinai, but he restored the covenant that existed in the beginning between Yahuwah Elohim and the Adam and humankind. This is why Yahshua says to Nicodemus, when we read it in our English-based Bibles, it says you have to be born again. Literally what it says is you have to go back to the beginning. So a very important thing that we understand, there's a difference between Yahshua as a concept and Yahshua as the Son of Man. And like we've said before, we can't have the one without the other. Okay? Now, where were we? We also considered that during the plague of the hail, in the plagues of Egypt, that there was something in the mist separating the wrath of Yahweh Elohim, the fire, from his judgment, which was the hail. If we will consider that what separates his wrath from his judgment is his undeserved favor, what we call grace, then we can consider that the Word became flesh as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth, as Yahshua the Son of Man. Then we can consider that what is being spoken of now as being in the mist, this Chahashmal that's coming up, is Yahshua, full of grace and truth, and this is the concept. This is the redemption, again, deliverance and restoration of Yahuwah that is being shown here in this. If we're in captivity, we need the undeserved favor, and we need to be delivered from what it is. We get ourselves into it. We make teshuvah, and now we can make teshuvah because of the blood of Yahshua, and we can be removed from whatever we get ourselves into and restored back to where we should be. But we have to believe and receive. We went on, this was last time around, we said that the door in the wall is perceived by what surrounds the door. Is it our perception of what is surrounding the door that keeps us from entering in? And we talked about some verses out of Mark, and this was the story about the four guys that carried the paralytic guy, and they made a hole in the roof because they couldn't get through the door, and they lowered the paralytic down, and Yahshua said, your sins are forgiven. So we have that. Now we also discussed that something else happened. We said that there were some people in the room that were skeptical and said, you can't do that. And Yahshua said, what's easier? For me to say your sins are forgiven, or for me to say, take up your bed and walk? And he said, so you could see that I can do this. He told the paralytic, take up your bed and walk, and he did. And what we consider from this is that we receive forgiveness. We receive restoration. But if that lingering doubt is there that says, I didn't really get that, then we also have Yahshua as a concept that says, fine, pick up your bed and you carry it. I'm going to let you carry your burden until you come to the realization that you have truly made teshuvah, and then you'll be restored. So there's a little bit more to the story than simply he healed somebody. So we consider that there was no room to receive them, so many that they crowded the door. Is it because you are paralyzed and carried by spiritual poverty, bringing the one who was paralyzed, which was carried by four? When we are in a state of spiritual poverty, we become paralyzed. Are you willing to rise above your situation in order to come into the presence of that which can redeem, deliver, and restore you? And the story said, when they could not come near him because of the crowd at the door, they uncovered the roof where he was, and when they had broken it up, they let down the bed where the paralytic lay. When Yahshua saw their faith, he said unto the paralytic, Son, your sins are forgiven. Our strength depends on our ability to reach for or through the door, and our being in subjection to the door, according to an account of our perception of its instruction and guidance. Only then can we enter into the garden and be surrounded by it, coming under the blessings of Yahuwah, our Elohim, through Yahshua. We have a choice to turn away from the presence of Yahuwah, or we can make teshuvah and come into the presence of Yahuwah to acknowledge his presence surrounding us. In this, it is also our choice as humankind, and we said both collectively and as a whole, or as an individual. Right now it's an individual choice. There will come a time when humankind collectively has to make a decision that we can reach for the Zitzit and learn from, receive guidance from, and blessing by the wings, the instruction of Yahuwah Elohim, being in fellowship with or in the Spirit, moving in the direction of or into the instruction and guidance of Yahuwah Elohim that connects us intimately to Yahuwah as his beloved, not turning from the direction of the instruction of Yahuwah Elohim in our walk and in our way of life, as well as staying where we need to be in our worship life, our study, our prayer, our worship, our praise. We cross over physically from one way of life to another, and we cross over from the physical to the spiritual. We enter into the realm of Yahuwah in the presence of Yahuwah Elohim. In this we walk when we rise up, when we lay down, both in life and in death. Okay, so these are the summation of what we covered over our last 6 studies of this. If we go into this part 7 of this, say, keeping these ideas in mind, we consider the chariot more and more as a vehicle of spiritual growth as we move closer to Yahuwah Elohim. Now we will further equip ourselves in this 7th study of Yechezeqel as we consider who or what we were created to be, and the choices that we will have, or that we have, that will bring us closer to Yahuwah, who is our Elohim, as we journey with him through our lives. So, all that being said, we come to the verse. Verse 10 says, As for the likeness of their faces, they had the face of a man, and they 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Okay? So we're going to begin by considering the first 2 words. The first word is udemut, that means as for the likeness. Now the root of this word is demut, meaning likeness or similitude, but it comes from the root dama, that means to be like, but also to imagine or to think in the same way. It also means, and this is important, to make oneself like something else. Okay? The next word to consider is penechem, meaning their faces. Again, the root of this word is panim, that aside from face means presence, or to be in the presence of. Its root is pana, that means to turn toward or to turn away. So before we attempt to put any kind of an idea together, let's consider the representation of the four faces. What do the four faces represent? First is the face of a man. It literally says the face of Adam. So in this, it illustrates that the face of the human being, male or female, is not relevant, as this little phrase represents a human being as a whole. Okay? It means you and I. Now, this is important that we note that the only face not preceded by the phrase "and they four" is the face of Adam. It's the only one that's not preceded by "and them four," okay, or "and they four." So if we're going to understand this, we have to take a rabbit trail. We go to Bereshit 1:26 through 28, that says, "And Elohim said, Let us make Adam in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. And Elohim created the Adam in his own image. In the image of Elohim created he him. Male and female created he them." Okay? We're not talking about Adam, the first guy. We're talking about Adam, the human race, both male and female. So we automatically have to push all this chauvinistic sexism out of the Torah because it doesn't exist there. This is written for human beings, both kinds. "And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creeps upon the earth." So while we're in Bereshit, we'll take a look at Bereshit 2:4 through 8, that says, "These are the generations of the heaven and the earth when they were created, in the day that Yahweh Elohim made the earth and the heaven." Okay? "No shrub of the field was yet on the earth, and no herb in the field had yet sprung up, for Yahweh Elohim had not caused it to rain upon the earth. And there was no Adam to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. Then Yahweh Elohim formed the Adam of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the Adam became a living soul. And Yahweh Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the Adam whom he had formed." So there is a basis for us to begin to build on, so that we're going to understand what these animal faces are telling us. And it also explains to us why there's only one face of an Adam, but there's all the other, is the four, and the four, and the four. Okay? In these verses, we discover that Adam, the human being, both male and female, were created first in the image and the likeness of Elohim. We were created with the capacity to think and imagine just as Elohim thinks and imagines. To imagine means that we are able to conceptualize ideas that can be acted upon. Now, the Adam was blessed by Elohim, and as such was to be, and still today can be, fruitful and multiply. Not necessarily in the sense of procreation, but rather in the sense of growing spiritually in a relationship with Elohim in the realm of humankind. We can build our relationship with Yahweh Elohim right here where we are. Okay? This is because the Adam can think and imagine in the way that resembles the thought and the imagination of Yahweh Elohim. Also because of this trait, the Adam is to have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creeps on the ground. The word for dominion is uredu, that aside from dominion means to prevail against. It means to be greater than the fish of the sea, to be greater than the fowl of the air, and to be greater than every living thing that creeps upon the ground. How does fish and birds and all this fit into all this? The word for fish is dag, but it comes from a root daag that means to fear, to have anxiety, to have dread, and to be depressed. So from this we can understand that we are created to be greater than fear, anxiety, dread, and depression. The word for fowl is off, but it comes from the root oof, that aside from meaning to fly, means to be dark. So, in this we can see that we are created to be greater than the darkness. It is our perception of the light that can lead us out of the night from evening to morning. Now, we have in every living thing that creeps upon the earth, in this we understand that we have a choice in the tet, that we can seek Elohim by and through his word, or that we can seek the carnal enticements of the Satan. We have the ability to have dominion over our choices. We have free will. In the verse, these are the generations of the heavens and of the earth, when they were created in the day that Yahweh Elohim created, or made the earth and the heaven. He created the heavens and the earth, but he made the earth and the heaven. Okay? In this, we see that we are both physical and spiritual beings, as described in the phrase, Yahweh Elohim made earth and heaven. And this is further supported by the verse 7, that shows that Yahweh Elohim took the physical earth to create our physical side, and then blew into our nostrils the spiritual side. Lastly, Yahweh Elohim placed the Adam in the Garden of Eden to tend it. In this we see that Adam, that's you and I, Adam was created specifically for a purpose designed by Yahweh Elohim. What was the purpose that he was created for? First of all, it tells us there was no shrub. There was nothing had popped up yet because there was no one to take care of it. So we have the responsibility of taking care of the things that grow within us, and we have the responsibility of bearing fruit. Secondly, we also find that he took the Adam and placed him in Eden, within his hedge of protection, to take care of it. Literally, the word says to guard it. So we have a responsibility to guard the things of Elohim. This is why he named the animals. Why did he name the animals? It was more than getting funky names like platypus and stuff like this. We must be able to understand and put a face on the things of Yahweh Elohim. So, very important little things that we find in this creation story that apply to us. We were created to take care of the business of Yahweh Elohim in the realm that he put us in. Okay? We were created to have fellowship with Yahweh Elohim. This is why he separated Ish and Isha, so that we wouldn't be alone and so that he wouldn't be alone. Everybody with me? Okay. So, lastly, Yahweh Elohim placed the Adam in the Garden of Eden to tend it. In this we see again that we were created for a purpose. If we can understand these things, we can grasp why the face of a man is not preceded by and they for. We are not created to be in a state of spiritual poverty. The Dalet, the fourth letter of the Aleph Beit, means not only door, but it also means poverty. It is a choice, and that choice that we make illustrates the lion, the ox, and the eagle. So we start with the lion. The word for lion is aryeh. This root is found in ara, that means to gather, but it also means to be violent. A lion is also a representation of the strength of Elohim. In this we have a choice that we can gather our emotional state into the presence of and be strengthened by Yahweh Elohim, or we can allow ourselves to suffer from the violent emotions of the flesh. And we say, are the emotions of the flesh violent? Psychosomatic illness, and I can tell you from experience, I spent 2.5 years in the hospital when I worried myself there. I walked out of hospice twice because I worried myself there. The violence of our emotional tendencies can cause a lot of damage in our body, can cause damage in our relationships, can cause damage in our lives. So we can depend on the strength of Yahweh Elohim, or we can yield to these violent emotions that cause damage. Okay? So we have a choice that we can gather our emotional state into the presence of and be strengthened by Yahweh Elohim, or we can allow ourselves to suffer the violent emotions of the flesh. Now, this is on the right side, that represents strength, but also represents redemption, deliverance, and restoration that comes from Yahweh, his Yahshua, which is also represented by a lion. In this, we can formulate that we can make teshuvah when we lose focus on being gathered to Yahweh Elohim and fall to the violent emotions of the flesh. We can choose to be led by Yahusha over the Yardin, those things that drag us down, being led to Makom, the place within Elohim. We recall the story of the children of Israel that were led by Joshua over the Jordan to the place. And we can apply this here, that we can allow Yahshua, that thing that delivers us and restores us, to guide us over those things that drag us down, that bring out those emotions that we don't need, to take us to Makom. Makom is one of the names of Elohim. It means the place, that we can find our place within him and be surrounded by him. So we are once again, and I jumped way ahead of myself, but we are once again in the garden. Okay? So, or we can be fearful of what lies ahead, believing the false report of the deceiver, and be turned away back into the wilderness. What was the other option for the children of Israel? 2 people said, hey, let's go in. One person said, no. Or the other 10 people said, no, that's not a good idea. They have giants in there. So, the word for ox is shor, that comes from the root shur, that means to travel or to journey. The Proto-Hebrew of the Aleph is the head of a bull, the head of an ox. Aleph is the letter that represents Yahweh Elohim. So in this, again, we have a choice. We can journey or travel with Yahweh Elohim, or we can again yield to the deception of the Satan and choose the carnal path in our existence. We'll note also that the ox is on the left side. This represents both weakness and judgment. In this we consider that we are weak. That when we are weak, Yahweh is our strength, which is again represented by the ox. Ox again, the word El means mighty one, something that's stronger than we are. So the ox again is a representation of something stronger than we are. And we have to recognize that Yahweh Elohim is also our judge, and that we are judged according to the choices we make. These 2 ideas lead us to consider the center face, which is the eagle. This comes from the word nesher, that can also